Hi, I'm Deb McIntosh and welcome to Community Connections. Today I'm with Heather Weeding and Deb Cook of Castlegar Hospice. Ladies, welcome and thank you for agreeing to be here.
Well, thanks for inviting us. We're really happy to be here.
So, Heather, this is a relatively new position for you, I understand, and only a month or two?
Since January, yep.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit about it. What do you do?
Well, I was hired as the coordinator, so what I do is I coordinate clients who are referred and volunteers and match them. So that's sort of it in a nutshell, but it seems to be a lot more than that. It's learning about what hospice and palliative care is about and doing community presentations. If you ask me more questions, I'll probably be able to respond more, but that's the basis of it, yeah.
So when I think of hospice, I automatically think of death and dying.
Yep.
And that's not a bad, it doesn't have to be a bad thing. I suppose for some, but how do you deal with that? Like, so that's when hospice steps in when somebody's at the near end of their life, or?
Yes, certainly that is one of the places where we can step in. And what you're describing and thinking of is sort of the classic, that's what hospice is. It's the bedside vigil as a person is nearing the end of their life. What hospice is really about, actually, is about living in quality of life, because until our last breath, until we die, we're alive, right? So that journey that actually we're all on can start way upstream. So yes, it can be towards the end when somebody knows that perhaps they have days or weeks or months. We also provide supports that are grief supports for people who, and Deb's going to talk a bit about this, people who are grieving, they've lost someone, but also perhaps they've had a change in their life. They've gone through a separation or divorce, they've lost a job, they've lost a pet, so we also provide support for that. Hospice was originally started centuries ago to provide care for people who were grieving, and it's really about relieving suffering. And so there's a lot of different points throughout our life that we may suffer. So hospice looks to relieving that. There's other things that we also do called nav care, that's short for navigational care. And let's say somebody has got a diagnosis and it's life-changing or life-limiting. Somehow or other it's fairly significant. Maybe they're 25 years old and they've got this diagnosis. So we're not talking about a diagnosis where they're going to be dying shortly, but their life has changed and they've got this system that they have to deal with. So we can also provide supports there as well.
Well, that sounds wonderful, because really most people I talk to, and I did talk to some people about hospice before coming here, is that the perception there is dealing just with death at the end of life. So it's really neat to hear that you're involved in the journey.
That's a great way to, yeah.
And that, I think that presents a warm and welcoming thing to bring hospice in sooner than later.
Right.
And I think that's a comforting, wonderful thing that you offer. Deb, you're a volunteer.
Yes.
What roles do you take on there?
So I have palliative care clients and grief support clients as well. Mostly I've been doing grief because of COVID. I didn't have any palliative clients during that time, so I've done more grief support.
And what does that entail? So do you just sit with people? Do you sit with the person whose journey may be coming to an end sooner than thought, or do you spend that time with family, or is it a mix of both?
So are you talking about like for grief? Because it's...
Well, for grief and palliative, like how do you work just with the family, or do you work with the person, or is it a combined effort?
Yeah, so like for grief clients, it's basically just one-on-one for the grief support. And so for me, what's really important is creating first building a rapport with the client, and then building a very strong foundation of, safety and trust unconditional love and acceptance and compassion. And probably the most important is just having a real openness and an ear for listening, like from a very open, loving space. So that's the most important, so that the client feels heard and understood, you know, like with no judgments, no expectations. And so that's, you know, the role mostly is just really being of the listening of the client. That's one of the biggest things that I find. You know, so they can just feel free to express whatever is there for them.
Right, so you're not trying to change their perception of what's happening, just simply being a support so that they can vent, talk about you know, things past or things in the future that may be coming down. So just a really nice release of not having to hold all that stuff in. And I guess sometimes you can't always say that to a family member for fear of hurting them or bringing more stress onto them. I would imagine I would see that as a significant role if I were in a position of my journey coming to an end. I would hate to burden my family with a bunch of stuff that I would potentially lay on them, if you will. And I think it's wonderful if you had a caring, open, honest relationship with someone that you could just say whatever. And wouldn't the world be a better place if we could do that all the time?
Correct, correct. And the other thing is, too, that I find is that with each client, like everybody has their own unique journey, like through the grieving process. And that's so important to honor, you know, so that everyone is just, you know, respected and honored for who they are and for their process. Because, you know, there's never two alike. And so it's not about comparing or that it should be a certain way or look a certain way. Like, it's just being with the client and, yeah, and just allowing the client to voice and, you know, do their journey the way they need to do it. So.
That's beautiful. You know, you often hear people saying, I'll hold space for you. And being able to sit and listen and take that in and be genuine in your concern and care and giving them the opportunity, I think is a beautiful thing. Absolutely beautiful. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Heather, you've been around the block. Like, you've been doing this kind of work for a long time in different avenues. What's your background that makes you the person that is able to do all this stuff and pull it together? Because not everyone can do this.
Perhaps not. It's about caring, right? And it's about, as Deb was saying, being with a person in the here and now. So I was thinking about this as I was, I have this interview today, and I thought, that's kind of cool. Throughout my life, you hear the term kind of cradle to the grave, and I had at one time being a Healthy Family coordinator, and Healthy Family provides supports for people who are pregnant and with children up to the age of 6. So that lovely time, that entry into life and the beginning of the journey, and then I've worked throughout with people dealing with addictions and grief and loss, and so there's the key word there, dealing with grief and loss, because as we go through life and change and we go through tough times, right, we learn how to be there with people. So, and once you've learned that, that's transferable, or who you are. It is kind of cool. I've had to learn things, very concrete, specific pieces of information related to end of life, which is useful information for volunteers to know, because they can share that with clients. So I'm learning that, and our volunteers learn that. Because I just wanted to talk a little bit about an experience that I had when my mom was dying many years ago. Because I didn't know an awful lot about hospice, as I was saying. That wasn't part of my specific experience. But my mom was in a hospice care facility at the time, and I was there sitting with her in her last couple of weeks. And there was somebody who came in and, you know, I can't remember if they were a hospice volunteer or maybe they were a nurse or who knows, maybe they were the janitor. But they told me some specific things, and they said, you know, because I was sitting there knitting, which is one of the things I do. And they said, you know, why don't you put that yarn and that fiber that the sock that you're knitting, put it where your mom can feel it. Because my mom had also been a knitter. Now, by this time, my mom was not communicating. And for all intents and purposes, she looked like she wasn't really conscious or aware. But this person said, you know, your mom might find that really helpful. And I did. I put that there. And my mom was lying there, and I could see her hands moving, right? So I was really grateful to that person who told me that, gave me that little bit of information. So that's the thing about our hospice volunteers is, yes, they have that presence and the caring. They're also given information, and they're things that can be helpful for people to know, such as that feeling and touch is one of the last senses to go. Hearing is one of the last senses to go. So it's helpful to tell family members that, you know what, your loved one can likely or could likely be hearing you right now. So you might want to be aware of the kinds of things you're saying, and also make sure you say the things you do. So we bring the caring, and we also bring knowledge of that can be helpful. I also wanted to clarify something. So the grief and support is also for other people and family members. So, for example, you know, maybe somebody's lost their father or lost a family member or friend or what, and have had nothing to do with hospice or palliative care, but they can receive support from us. We don't provide counseling, you know, if it's complex or they have other issues that they need support for, of course we refer them on. But what our volunteers bring is, as Deb so eloquently said, is that presence and that open, compassionate and care.
Yeah, and what a beautiful thing that is to pass on to person, volunteer to volunteer, because those are the qualities that a lot of people could use within their own lives and their own workplaces. And if we just did that, you know, sometimes I'm guilty of that as well, is I listen to respond, I don't listen to hear, you know, and having that ability to do that in the most sacred time in somebody's life is just, I tell you, it's beautiful. You know, a little antidote. My dad, when he was passing, he chose to pass at home, and us kids were there. And you know, there's only so many of us to go around the clock and stuff. So hospice came in, and it just happened to be somebody that my dad had known in his glory days, if you will, you know. And his name was Bernie, and he was a hospice volunteer in Trail, and that was such an important thing for my dad. That somebody there that he could relate to and talk about the old times and the you know, the wonderful things that happened in life, the regrets and all of that stuff, talking about work. And this man gave my dad something that we couldn't give him. And that, again, was so spectacular, because I just thought hospice came in and sat by your bed and did crossword puzzles until, you know, and he just offered this wonderful, wonderful service, not only as a hospice volunteer, but as a friend and as a human. It was very beautiful. It was very beautiful. My dad was so happy. So thank you, hospice. It's a great thing to have, and I'm glad to hear that it's expanded more than what we think it is out there. So that if you're grieving a loss of anything or going through something, that you folks can be called upon just to listen and hear that out. So it's
or somebody who's you know, struggling with social isolation and loneliness, and because that really impacts a person's health, and having somebody who can help them advocate for themselves, understand the system, provide some social and emotional support, increases quality of life. So that's really what hospice is focused on, is quality of life, right to the very end.
Yeah. And that's wonderful, because that just changes the whole way of that you think about it, you know, instead of just saying, because Because, you talk about, if your parents are passing or something, well, you better bring in hospice to help us get through. But you don't think of it for the other stuff. So I'm really glad you ladies are talking about that today, because what a valuable resource, community resource. That is huge, because there's not a lot of groups out there that just say, call us up, we'll sit and listen. We'll be beside you. We'll walk along with you. And that is a beautiful thing.
It's kind of amazing, isn't it? I mean,
It
that's what
is.
the that's amazing for me. So I get to work with all the volunteers, and it's what a pleasure, right?
I bet.
Yeah.
Because you think of it, it's about, to those of us that aren't involved in it, hospice is death, and it's final. And what you're telling us is that it's not. It's the journey from wherever they want to start that. And I don't know, it just says something. It makes my heart sort of beat faster thinking about it, because it's reassuring to know that there's people out there. So, because there's many people that are alone. So many people that are alone and going through these things on their own, that making a referral to somebody like yourselves for a friend would be much easier, knowing that it's not about the final destination. It's the journey to get there. And that I haven't heard before, Heather, except for when talking to you. And that just changes it. Absolutely everything that I knew, and albeit very little about hospice, that changes the whole dynamic of it. That it's a start, not a finish.
Right, and it's a dynamic, right?
Yeah.
It's a process.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Very, very interesting. Now, I know in the past they used to do things like walks with people in the parks and stuff like that. Is that going to continue on, or are you that far into it yet?
Well, we're going through a time of transition. The structure of how hospice is delivered in Castlegar has changed so much. Somewhat. There was an executive director, and her job was very comprehensive. So she did what I do, as well as a lot more administrative and promotion and that kind of thing. So that's she's had to leave the community. She had to move away, and so now the board is doing a lot of what she was doing, and I've just come in to do the volunteer and the matching up the volunteers and the clients. So the other activities, like you talked about, there was a hike for hospice that used to happen. I think there was a golf tournament, and there's been other events. Those could be in the works, right? At this point, it's reconfiguring. We certainly seem to be having requests for more grief support groups, so that's something we want to get up and running. So we have a vision of where we want to go, the kinds of things we want to do, increase knowledge around what palliative care is. It's not just those last couple of weeks. And advanced care planning. Do people even know what that is? So we want to start to work on developing those, but it's one step at a time, and we're all about quality of life, so then that means quality of what we provide and the service we provide. Yeah.
That's great. Deb, how long have you been with hospice?
For about 6 years now.
Well, you've been on a lot of journeys then.
I have. Yeah, amazing. Some have been really miraculous. Really beautiful. Yeah. It's
And does it help you in your own life? Does it give you something? I mean, I assume it gives you personal satisfaction knowing that you're there. But is it a tool that you can use in your own life with your family members?
Oh, absolutely. And and I also learn from my clients too, right? It's like any time, like for myself, like I've been doing volunteer work for over 30 years now. And so, my experience in any volunteer work is that it's so gratifying, and you learn so much, and whoever it is that I'm supporting, I'm getting just as much back as what they're receiving. It's always a two-way street. When you're coming from a place of love, it's always the connection. It's like there's no words to describe it. It's a huge gift for both people, right? And so that's why I'm still doing it. This is why I've been doing it for over 30 years of volunteer work, because it's the most gratifying thing that I could ever do in my life. It's it's miraculous. It really is. Like when you can be with another person and have that connection, there's nothing else more powerful than that to me.
And what a gift you give that person. What a, and to you as well.
Yes,
but
both.
I don't know. I just kind of think that if that person, you know, and I think about, you know, in my case, you know, if something were happening, it's soothing to know that you can call upon somebody to sit with you and hold space and do the things that, and say the things that need to be said. Even if it's not the person that you're saying to, just being able to have that avenue in a non-judgmental, beautiful, kind, loving, open way. And that's not something everyone can do.
I feel very blessed that I'm able to be that person, because it just fills my cup. It makes me who I am today. And you know, and some of the things, like when we were talking about palliative care, you know, like there's various things that you can do with your clients as well, right? Like, you know, I'll massage their feet and hands, or, you know, maybe they want me to read to them, or they like music. Like I had a client that just loved music, and I have an app on my phone. So, you know, we just start playing music, and then, you know, then he's sharing his whole life story with me, and, you know, it's absolutely beautiful. And then, you know, and then when he died, then I had his wife as a client for a grief client. And so that happens as well, right? So then I worked with her as a grief client.
So you're really there for the whole transition, aren't you? Like you go through it all with them.
Right. Yeah, and it's very beautiful. Like it's amazing. And, you know, and then with some of the palliative clients that I've had, when they're closer to the end, that's like, no words to describe that. It's like I'll walk in the room and, like, you know, and I always do a little meditation before I go and see a client, right? I always get into that state of being, right? And I'll walk in, and it's like, this happened to me 3 times with my clients. They just reach their hand out with this big smile, and I hold their hand, and like they just light up, and it's just like absolutely amazing. Like there's nothing more gratifying than that. Like, you know, and this is a person that's nearing death, and, you know, it's just like this absolute beautiful connection of just nothing but divine love, and it's like,
wow.
Wow.
Yeah,
powerful,
that's great.
right?
Yeah.
It's hard to say it without tears.
Oh, and you know what? Tears are beautiful, because I know you're feeling it with your heart, and I feel it too. And you know, I just can't thank you enough for the work that you do, because you can't put a price on it.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, and yeah, and it's a beautiful thing, and I feel more enlightened by both of you in what you have to offer. And Heather, I've known you for a little while now, and I certainly know that you're a kind, caring, compassionate, brilliant person. You're very smart. You're very good at sitting and listening and giving advice and hearing people out. Just, you know, with your position at the other organizations, and the work that you and I have done together, as me being an employee, and that is really wonderful, because you find a sense of not only friendship but security, and knowing that I could come to you and just say, hey, Heather, I'm going through a hard time, and I know that you would sit and listen in the way that you do, and you don't try and solve it. You just allow me to talk it through so that I get to the end and the solution is there. You're very good at that, and not everybody has that ability to do that. So I can only see wonderful things happening in the future for hospice.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for your very kind words. Thank you.
It's nice to know that there's folks like you out there that are taking a lead in what a lot of us just feel is the end of the line. And to know that there's so much more in the journey there, and then carrying on with the family after that. I can't say enough wonderful things about it, because it fills my cup to know that. As we all age, we get to that point where we start thinking about that stuff a little bit more, right? And it's reassuring and comforting to know that. We are going to wrap up soon, so I just want to say, are you looking for volunteers right now? Are you recruiting?
Always looking for volunteers. We do have training, really good training. There's a training session that's coming up in April for the basic volunteer training, and then there's grief support training, so somebody could do one or the other, or both. That's in May, and then we won't be doing another training until the fall.
So Heather, if somebody wants to volunteer, how do they go about getting in touch and finding out more about hospice?
They can give us a phone call, or they can contact us by email at castlegarhospice@gmail.com. That's pretty easy and straightforward. That's how I like it.
That's great. So again, I want to thank you both for the work that you do, for taking the time to be on the journeys with people that they are on, and just bringing a service to Castlegar that is so beautiful. And it's absolutely gone from my perception from the end of the journey to the start. And that's a beautiful thing. So thank you both for coming, and I hope that we can do a follow-up soon and just see how things are going.
That would be
Your
great.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your insight and for the invite. Thank you.
Thanks for accepting.
Thank you.